Good evening, and you're very welcome. I'm taking a little bit of a screenshot there. You're very welcome to this afternoon's or this evening's Women's National League podcast. I'm back once again with Aaron Clarke to join me for the next maybe 30, 40 minutes or so to talk about all things that have been going on in the league this week. And it's been a fairly busy week, both inside and outside the league for Ireland and Irish players across the globe. Aaron, what have you been up to for the week? What's been your highlight?
I got to watch a bit of football. Watched it all. Watched the majority of it all from home this week. Work wise at the weekend, so I couldn't really get to a game. So had the privilege of enjoying LOITV. Was looking forward to watching Shelbourne against Athlone, and unfortunately, game wasn't streamed, so that sort of back pedaled out and ended up watching Bows and Galway and watching a little bit of Sligo Rovers against Wexford Youths.
So many positives to talk about this week. Katie McCabe nominated for the Ballon d'Or. That's a pretty big deal. 23 years since the last Irish nominee for that particular competition or for that particular trophy. Denise O'Sullivan, her side, North Carolina Courage, into the final of the NWSL Challenge Cup. That takes place on Saturday evening, 7 o'clock Irish time, and the game will be streamed live on nwslsoccer.com. So well worth checking that out for all fans of Irish football. Congratulations to Denise and her teammates for that. But it's also been busy. Couple of moves. I know the transfer window here is closed, but it hasn't closed in the UK, or at least it hadn't when there was a late transfer for an Irish player into the league. They've been fairly busy signing Irish players this season. They're in the championship, of course. Kate Mooney of Peamount, the latest player to leave the league and go to pastures new in London.
Yeah, it's been something that's sort of been brewing for a couple of weeks. There was talk of other clubs being interested. It's probably the first season where Kate has been fully fit in a couple of years after niggles and injuries. Like you look at not last season 4, she does the ACL on her day after scoring on her debut for DLR against Galway. Then last season had a couple of niggles. This year she's hit fine form with a good Peamount side, and she's been rewarded with that move. It's probably come at the wrong time for a Peamount United viewpoint with 5 games to go after last weekend's games. But listen, you can't not wish Kate well. It's a good opportunity for her. It's an opportunity to step out and see what she's capable of. I think she'll do okay, and at that sort of level. She made her debut in a defeat against Durham, where she played against 2 Irish players, with actually 3 Irish players. Nisha McAloon, Saoirse Noonan, and Eleanor Ryan Doyle were involved in the Durham side. So herself and Sophie Whitehouse, 2 Irish players at Lewis this year. Be interesting to watch. Keep an eye, see how Kate gets on, see how she develops. Like Kate's one of these. She's quite intelligent. She's quite smart. She's switched on off the field as well, and with the way she's gone about her studies and stuff like that. So she's going to decide to give full-time football a bit of a rattle and see how she gets on. And listen, I hope she does well. I hope she's a success, can stay injury free, and give Lewis the best opportunity.
Yeah, as you mentioned, she made her debut at the weekend. Loads of Irish in action over the last couple of days abroad. But let's maybe focus on the games in Ireland first and foremost. The game on TG Cahir, of course, Wexford Youths ran out fairly comprehensive winners, 4-1 at Sligo Rovers, despite that late equaliser for Sligo, or not equaliser, late consolation goal, should I say, for Sligo at the very, very end. It's been a rough ride in the league for Sligo. They're still bottom 2 and can't really see them getting out of there. In terms of that particular game, not possibly the best game of the weekend to pick. I know when we're televising the game, we like to try and kind of get it around, or TG Cahir, the powers that be, like to try and get it around and get to as many venues and showcase as many teams as possible. But that wouldn't have been the one I would have been picking from around the grounds for last weekend in terms of giving us a genuinely competitive spectacle. Is that fair?
No, probably wouldn't be the one I'd have been picking. I'd have been probably picking Athlone and Shels, was probably the game I'd have said. But for me, the one thing is, and I called for this last year, so I can't really complain over. I call for the fact that I want to see more games being shown. I just don't want to see the same teams being shown week out, week in, week out. And like you look at some of the games that they have shown, they've shown Bows from Dalymount, they've shown Sligo from the showgrounds, they're going to show Galway from Eamon DC Park. They've got around a little bit more this year, which has been great. And like the fact that they're showing a lot of games on the bounce is good. I do suspect that that there will be occasions as the season grows on they'll get a little bit more picky with selections. I think they'll have to as things close in. But like the other side of it is, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful to DLR Waves here, but when you've got DLR against Peamount, which maybe wouldn't be seen with the way DLR season is and the players that they've lost as a major game, you couldn't. It's hard to say let's pick the league leaders, and then obviously with the fact that the game was having to be moved venue last minute from the bowl to Whitehall to Home Farms ground because of the unavailability of the bowl, sort of that would have thrown ruction. So I think TG Carr probably dodged the bullet that they weren't shown that having to change up sticks and change things. So I'm glad they're going around the grounds a little bit. It's good for the league, it's good for the exposure, but I do get you where you're coming from when you say it probably wasn't the best of games to pick, but the way the season has gone for both sides, it never really was it? Sligo, yes, they had to win this season against Cork, but the only other point they picked up was a draw against Treaty. Other than that, they haven't. And Wexford started being a bit of hit and miss. 1 week they're great, next week they're very poor, and like it's a strange old season where Wexford's, a lot of people, me included, was probably tipping them as favourites for the league, and I think that was probably before Rihanna Jarrett come in when they signed the likes of Emily Corbett, the strength that they had in strength and depth, and then it just hasn't materialised, and it's turned into a bit of a rough old season. But with the other result at the weekend, which we'll talk about in the Bows Galway game, there's opportunities for them to maybe finish in the top four now, and if they go finish in the top four, considering where they were, you'd probably have to say it's not the worst of the season. Being out of the cup is disappointing. So their only real thing they have to play for from a Wexford viewpoint is fourth place, whereas Sligo do have the cup game in 2 weeks' time. But for the league, Sligo just want to see the league out at this stage.
In terms of that league opportunity in the fourth place position, Bows and Galway scored a straw for them in Dalymount at the weekend. The only real winners in that were Wexford, really, for that opportunity, with both teams dropping 2 points.
Yeah, it wasn't a great game. Galway probably had the best of the limited chances in the first half. Katie Malone had a good chance in the second half for Bows, but keeper Berlin made a good save. And like, realistically, you just have to take one look at the table, BReifne, and you sort of have a look at the goals that both sides have conceded. Like you look at Bows have conceded 13, scored 17. Galway have scored 17, conceded 12 in 15 games. So it was never really going to be a high scoring game. The game in Eamon DC Park was a wicked deflection off Sarah Rowe, and the keeper tried to clear the ball over and went overhead, and that was all that separates them. So like, I wasn't surprised to see it 0-0. It wasn't great quality. It wasn't the best of quality either, and neither side really deserved to win that game.
Do you think Wexford can sneak into that fourth place?
They'll need a run of results. The problem is in order for Wexford to do that, I do think Wexford are going to need to beat Peamount. And I think there's no if, buts, or maybes. They're going to have to beat Peamount. They're going to have to go unbeaten for the rest of their fixtures if they are to do it.
To be fair, that is what happens this time of the season. If you're top of the league, you start losing games. So we'll have to see if it's going to be third time lucky for the Peas, and if they can hold on to that league title position, at least at the moment. Some of the games around the weekend, you mentioned Shels and Athlone 2-1 to the champions down there, ahead of their run in the UEFA Women's Champions League. Brief run as it was. They got beaten, of course, on Wednesday morning by Glasgow City. Fairly comprehensive, although the scoreline only suggests it was 2-0. It was probably a bit more comfortable than that for the Scottish side. First of all, the game of the weekend, Athlone, you'd have expected Shels, given the way the seasons have gone for both sides, to have won that. Surprised it was only 2-1?
Not really. Athlone have been in sort of a bit of a rejuvenation since Kilduff and Ken Kieran have come in there. So I'm not really surprised. I wasn't surprised. I thought that would be probably the test that Shels would have needed going away to Champions League. No disrespect to them, but last year they played Treaty, who they probably should have beaten 7 or 8-0 before going away, and it really wasn't ideal preparation. Take the lead, get pegged back, and take the lead again before half-time, you'd have to be happy enough. The interesting thing to come out of that was Amanda McQuillan started the game and subsequently started the Champions League game against Glasgow, which probably surprised a few people considering she'd been back a while and Courtney Maguire had kept her position in goal. The one thing I will say, and Shels fans and Shels people may not like this, the one problem with Shels is that because they've lost so many players, and then they lose a couple more and they're bringing in more again, players just don't have time to gel. You have too many new faces there. Champions League was always going to come way too early for them, and it was really a non-starter. If all they could really do was go out and sort of do their best, because it's difficult to sort of gel that team together. They brought in 5 or 6 signings in the window, promoted a couple of players from the academy, But the problem is that like you're bringing in players from abroad who won't have played many games with each other, and that's very difficult. And I've seen comments on social media from somebody who used to be involved with Shelbourne, and he sort of said that like the problem is they're constantly losing the players. What like something needs to be done for them not to lose the players. The problem is you can't stop a player going to a professional contract when it's not available. It's not available here to them at the minute, and like that's the unfortunate thing. Like we knew in Jesse Stapleton's terms, we knew Jesse Stapleton was gone before the season even started. We knew once she turned 18 that the West Ham deal was on the table and the West Ham deal was going to be done. So it wasn't a case that we were sort of, it was unexpected, whereas previous seasons, maybe some of the ones who've gone have been a little bit less expected. And like for Shels, it's difficult to lose so many players and then have try to bring in players. Like, don't get me wrong, I really like the like of young Rebecca Devereaux, Hannah Healy, I think it's Kate McCarran or Kate McCann, youngster up top as well. There's some good young players there for Shelbourne. But the problem is when you're having to throw them in at this level, like don't get me wrong, Hannah Healy when she's been put in the league hasn't put a foot wrong. But when you're being thrown them young players in these big games, it's really, really difficult. And like it's tough for Shels to start to go into these games. They're nearly one hand behind their back as much as they don't want to say. Like the biggest difference for me, I think, between Shels and Glasgow is Glasgow are a full-time team. That's the biggest difference. And when Glasgow lose a player, Glasgow can afford to go and replace someone of quality and bring them in and have them there for a period of time. Whereas for Shels, they were searching around trying to bring players in before the end of the window, and then did a couple of weeks before the season started back. They've only played 2 games since the season started back. The first league game, then they were off for the cup, then they played the league game again, and it's stop start. And I feel sorry for them. I'm hoping eventually one Irish team will make the breakthrough again off the back of what Bristol done, that what Raheny done against Bristol, and even what the likes of Francis done years ago and Peamount done when they got to knockout stage and stuff like that. You know, I'm hoping teams will start to make that breakthrough. It's getting a lot harder. There's going to be a lot more needed to make the breakthrough, but like one of these years, I think it's probably going to be until the league goes fully professional, where we've players that are on full-time contracts. That's probably going to be the best chance we have of breaking through, because it's getting more and more difficult. Like you see, even I know you're going to mention it in a minute when you mentioned Katie McCabe. Like Katie McCabe playing in Champions League with Arsenal in the qualifying phase. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't get any easier.
No, absolutely. At least they are in the league path rather than the Champions path, so never going to be directly opposing the likes of Shels, but at the same time, it is the reality. They're at the same level, trying to get to the same place. One of those 16 spots in the group stages of the Women's Champions League later in the season. Looking across the rest of the league, plenty of other games this weekend. Shamrock Rovers had a fairly straightforward victory down in Turner's Cross, 4-0 in the end against Clarke City. That keeps the pressure on from a distance, maybe, on Peamount at the top of the table.
This is just a carbon copy of what happened in Tala. We talked about this last week. First half, Cork go in at the break, well in the game, and then all of a sudden they get blitzed just after half time. The one thing for me, and I said it last week and I'll say it again, young Joy Ralph played barely any football in the first half of the season. She goes into that Rovers team. We probably think she's signed for Rovers. She's going to be a bench player. She's not going to start for them. She's already come in and scoring goals. And I think the problem is that she's taking players, like you look at, yes, Anya was on the bench, but Anya's sort of only really coming back into the squad. But the likes of Alana McAvoy coming out, who would have been in the Ireland camp going to the USA earlier in the year. Like the problem is for them, for Collie, is that players are starting to score goals now. I think it's a big, I don't know if it's too late for an Abby Larkin whether to get a move now this side of the UK window. The window doesn't close for another week, so I don't know if it's too early for her to get a move now, whether she will. But she needs to continue to put herself in the shop window, continue to score goals against the team, against everyone she plays against, and sort of put that way out. You can definitely see she's come back from the World Cup with a bit of confidence, with a bit of a spark and vigor in her, that she knows she needs to go on to the next level. I've been critical of maybe does she have the attitude to want to do it. So I think the next couple of months for her are key. But from a Rovers viewpoint, 4-0 win, you're happy out. Stephanie Zambra also on the score sheet as well. I think for her it's been a massively frustrating season with injury. Picks up the injury the second or third game of the season, and then misses the entire rest of it up until the international break, up until the World Cup, and you're sort of thinking for her, how much football does the likes of Steph have left? What's the want to sort of continue to go at this level? You know, and I think for her to get on the score sheet, it's probably a big confidence booster for her, and like I think she'd be big for Rovers in the second half of the season. But I just think Rovers have to go unbeaten. They have to win every game if they want to put any pressure on Peamount.
I agree, but I think with Steph, the only two professions, it's not going to be a coach that ends her career. It's going to either be a doctor or an undertaker, because there's no way Steph is going to stop playing. She just loves the game too much. She never officially retired from the Irish team because she still, whether she's good enough or not is a completely different debate, but she still wants to be playing football. And I don't really think she cares anymore about what level she's at. I think she's delighted to be at Shamrock Rovers. She's obviously loving life at the moment. I don't know if football is her number one priority anymore, if that makes sense. She's moved on to do commentaries. She's done a bit of reality TV show stuff with Dancing on Ice and the Hell Week, Survivor Hell Week. And I think football is still, in her head, is the number one priority, but I don't know if reality football is the be all and end all that it was to her maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Well, I don't blame her. I don't blame her. The thing is, and people will probably turn around and say, Steph's this, Steph's that. One of the nicest people you meet. But the other side of it is that she's worked hard at the opportunity she's been given outside of football to take advantage of. Whereas you see some people being given an opportunity and maybe don't grasp and don't pull it along. You know, like the fact that RTE pull her back for men's games and asked her to do Champions League games and stuff like that, like it speaks volume for how highly they rate her.
No, I agree, and the reality that she's doing World Cup games and World Cup finals, and I think it's huge for, I think herself, Anya O'Gorman, Karen Duggan, and a few others who've been involved at that level, Megan Campbell. I know we've seen a lot of those faces kind of time and time again. Chloe Mustaki when she was out injured, Rihanna Jarrett, and others. They deserve all the credit in the world for the profile that they've given to players and former players. And it's great to have those kind of ambassadors for the origins of the modern game and the league, that they're coming back now and adding to that next step in their career. Because let's be honest, Anya stepped away from international football again. I'd expect to see more of her doing a lot more media work. I think she's just at the stage where they're enjoying whatever time is left of their playing careers, and they're really, really going to push on, I think, around the game and add, whether that's as coaches or as commentators or as analysts or whatever it might be down the line. I'm really, really excited to see.
Well, Anya's already talking about our next part. Just moving away from this for a second, just while it's come to my mind, just a reminder to anybody, former internationals, that the FAI are still giving 2 tickets to the Northern Ireland game for any player who's represented Ireland at senior. I think it's at senior level.
It is, yeah.
Level. At senior level.
That's a mistake. I think the FAI should have made that to every single player. If you've played for Ireland at any level, if you've worn that green jersey, you're part of. I genuinely feel that you're part of the story. Whether you played for 15 minutes at the tail end of an under-17 international 15 years ago, or whether you went to the university games before it was even popular back in the early 90s, late 90s, I think it should be a thing that we're bringing everybody who's been involved in the women's game to that stadium, regardless of what they're paying in. Now, I don't think anyone should be getting in for free, other than obviously the former players, but I think it should be just whatever it takes to get anyone who's
it should be a celebration.
100%, because it's not just about one game. It's not just about the World Cup or what's happened since the World Cup. It's about everything to do with women's football from 1974 right through to now, or 73, whenever it was, right through to now, and every single person who's played a part, good or bad, in the development of the women's game, because it's all got us to where we are now, where we have that opportunity to fill the national stadium against, albeit, Northern Ireland, which does have its own kind of connotations. And
I also think they're going to bring a good crowd.
Yeah, I think so. I think the novelty of watching Northern Ireland play in a stadium that big, I know they play in Windsor Park on the regular, but to play a kind of an away game in a stadium of that size with that little bit of local rivalry, not that there's much rivalry, they play each other so often at all levels across the game, but there is still that kind of cut and thrust of that local playing the neighbours and wanting to beat them. It's going to be a big day, but yeah, keep your eye on that. It's a Saturday afternoon as well. There's no reason for anyone not to make it, and bring whatever youngsters are in your world. Like if it's a niece or a nephew, particularly the female nieces, kids, whatever it might be, if they have any interest in football, get them along and get them to that game. It's going to be
I've already told my little sister she's not coming with me. I told her she can make her. I told her she can make her own way into the Aviva because it's just a train across from us from the other side of the city. The question is though, is BReifne Earley going to make the trip up to Dublin for this one?
I was making this decision yesterday. It is a bit of an ordeal getting to Dublin. It's not really, but it feels like an ordeal getting to Dublin. But I think I'm going to try and do it. I am down to work that day, but I'm going to have a chat with my colleagues and see if I can weasel a couple of hours off and head up the road. And I think it's important that everyone gets involved, no matter where they are in the country. It's a big day, and I think it should be celebrated by everyone who's been involved in the game at any level. I think it should be a great day out as well, and a really good celebration of everything women's football. Anyway, before we get distracted by going back in time and thinking of days yonder, DLR Waves and Peas, the last game, we didn't really touch on this, although I've got to mention Peamount United. It just looks to be procession now. I know Graham Kelly kind of put the kibosh on them on the FAI Cup draw a couple of weeks back when he said that as far as he was concerned, it was job done for Peamount. I know James O'Callaghan would kill us if we agreed with that sentiment, albeit we kind of do. Your thoughts on the game at the weekend? Is it just one more step on the way to reclaiming the league title for the Peas?
Yeah, for me, it's one step in the right direction. Like you look at since they come back from the break, they've beaten Bows, they've beaten DLR in the league. Young Ellen Doolan scoring as well, getting her first National League goal. The interesting thing about this, that was the fact that the amount of kids that James O'Callaghan has had to use as well. Like we talk about Shels being reliant on kids at times. It's been stages where James has had to use them and be reliant on them as well. Young Jess Fitzgerald in the middle hasn't looked out of the park, and now with Kate Mooney going away, Ellen Doolan's going to be vital for them. I think from a Peamount point of view, it's just a case of just chalking off them games. Like you look at. They win their next two games, then they go to their third last game is against Wexford Youth on the midweek set of fixtures, and like it's just for them, it's just one more at a time. Win one game, get to the next game. You know, I think that's the mantra. But I just think the attitude, not the attitude. I just think they've learned so much from the last couple of years, and that's what's evident to me. Like I remember chatting to James O'Callaghan after they lost the cup final to Wexford Youth in the Aviva Stadium, and I talked to him a couple of days later, and I was asking him about, because the substitution sort of confused me, or I wasn't sure why, and I had a chat with him, and you could see how much he was sort of still reliving thinking back to the game. Did I make the right choice? Did I not? And I think 2021 hurts them an awful lot. I think that hurts an awful lot in Peamount for the fact that they go into the last two games against DLR and Galway knowing one win is good enough. They draw with DLR live on TG4, and then a week later you're 2-0 up against Galway thinking cruise control, lovely league title, staying in Peamount. The league title was on the sidelines that night, and then Galway come and score 5 goals, and all of a sudden you see you're a Peamount player, you watch that trophy being carried out of PRL Park and into the back of a cart that had the Talca Park to be presented to Shels. Like there's no doubt that hurt. Like you look at last season, the slump they went through the middle of the season, you could see there was definitely pressure there. I said it last year on the show. Was there too much pressure that James may lose his job? And in fairness to them, they finished the season off very well. If they didn't draw against Wexford Youth the second last day of the season, they were right back in it. And then the way they just started this season, like you have to think they've played 15. They've played 15 games, and they've only dropped points in 2 games. Yeah. Shels and Shamrock Rovers, a draw against Rovers and the loss against Shels. It's the only points they've dropped. Ultra consistent. From a DLR Waves viewpoint, it's some harsh lessons being learned. There are a lot of new players there. There are a lot of players that are playing in their first year in National League experience. A lot of young players who probably wouldn't be in the team if circumstances at the moment, they'd be in and around the fringes, and Laura Heffernan has no choice but to play them. Your only concern is that the last three or so transfer windows, DLR have just bled players. This it can't continue as well. I know they've managed to bring in a couple of youngsters here and there, but it can't continue from their viewpoint that, and for them to be competitive in this league, they can't just continue to lose the players the way they have been losing players, and it makes the season even more difficult for them. I know they've still got the cup where anything can happen in the cup draw, but they've got probably probably the second hardest cup draw they could have asked for with Shels away, and it's been a really disappointing season. It's been a disappointing season for a number of teams, and I think that's probably while we're talking about the positives and the teams who've done well, other teams have sort of struggled this year, and that's probably been the most disappointing thing. And I think DLR being right up there. Yes, they got a couple of early results, but they haven't really got many of late.
Yeah, no, it's been a big challenge for them. Let's take a quick look at the league table. You might just talk us through it, because obviously Shels not in action this weekend, so they're still in Lithuania at the Champions League. They have a game on Saturday as the finishing part of that. But a 5-0 victory for Shamrock Rovers in Sligo, or against Sligo, would see them move into second place with 5 games left in the league title. But they could be 9 points behind Peas at that stage.
Yeah, like Peamount play Clarke Saturday afternoon. I'd highly expect Peamount to pick up the 3 points and sort of continue that motoring on. Like from a Shels viewpoint, as you say, they don't play. They play Cardiff City on Saturday afternoon in the 3rd, 4th place playoff in the group. I think there's some really interesting games. Like you look at even Bows against Athlone. From a Bows viewpoint, it's a must-win game. They haven't won a game since they've come back from the World Cup break, so they have to start winning. They have to start winning games, and if they don't, you'd sort of have to fear for them a little bit. Galway and DLR on the TV game. Galway, it's an opportunity for Galway to go back to winning ways and sort of put that pressure on Bows. The one game for me that I think is probably one thing I'm mad saying this, but I said it to you earlier in the season. I wouldn't be surprised if Treaty take another point off Wexford Youths.
Yeah, no, they've been really, really impressive this year. Relative to where they have been in recent seasons, they've probably been my success story of the season. I think Alban Heiss has done a really good job. They scared Peamount something serious just a couple of weeks ago as well. You could be right. Now, I don't think Wexford will thank us for saying this, but it's genuinely...
You look at even the window. He brought in some more good players in the window. He brought in young Orla Fitzgerald. He's brought in players. He slightly adapted the system a little bit because he realised that they needed to freshen up. That the way they finished off wasn't the way they played the first 10 or so games. So like that's a sign of a manager who's aware of his surroundings and what's going on. And I think that's probably the biggest thing in Treaty. And like, if they don't win another game for the rest of the season, or they don't pick up another point for the rest of the season, I think the most important thing that Treaty United need to do this season is keep Alban Heiss. That's the most important thing. They need to build a bit of momentum. They need to build a bit of structure. Like the last couple of years, the biggest doubt, like no disrespect to the club, but they should be on 0 points. They should have no wins. They should be battered out the gate. The amount of changes that we've seen in the last 3 years with Treaty, it's nearly been new manager, players gone. They shouldn't be anywhere near competing where they are competing. And a lot of credit has to go to the players, the management, because the off-the-field stuff hasn't helped the club, hasn't helped them really develop and sort of get a synergy and kick on. They've sort of had a point. They get to maybe a base during the season. Then all of a sudden it's all changing again at the end of the season. Yeah. I think for them, in order to kick on, they really need to have that base at the end of the season, then be able to use that base that they built this year and actually go again, rather than wondering what players are going to get poached by what club, or what players are going to go where. I think from a Treaty viewpoint, realistically, they need to keep the large majority of that squad together next year and keep Alban there, and that'll sort of allow them to build. But I think they're having a good season. Is he close to the being worth? Is he worth a mention in the potential stakes for the likes of the manager of the year? He's probably he's definitely in the conversation.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it. At the minute, James O'Callaghan is probably wide out front with in the lead of that, but I definitely think the likes of Alban Heiss definitely deserves a mention and a conversation and that sort of thing. Then again, on the Wexford youth viewpoint, they still have Lizzie Kent in temporary charge. There's been no announcement as to what's happening. I'd suspect now we're just going to see Lizzie take the team for the rest of the year, and then we'll see potential change or potential movement as to what's going to happen. But from a Wexford viewpoint, I think it's important for them that they do win the game. It's important for them that they finish as high as possible, because they need to try and kick on. It's been a really disappointing season. I think the off the field stuff that's going to happen at the end of the year for Wexford Youths could be a positive with them going to Wexford FC. If there's more sponsorship opportunities there's more opportunities. Like it's a difficult one to put the finger on, and I'm sure if you ask the players, you probably wouldn't really get the honest and reflection answer as to what actually has gone wrong. But you could see in certain games where maybe years gone by, they'd have scored a goal here or they'd scored a goal there when they have the pressure and think that it just wasn't clicking. And
yeah, I think in Wexford, I think it's just a natural thing. I don't think that anything massively. No, I'm speaking in a vacuum. I'm not involved in the club, but I've seen this happen over the last 15 or 20 years in women's football, where the players who've been the key inspirations on the field and off the field maybe just don't have it in the tank anymore because age catches up with everybody. So,
but that's the same thing. We could nearly say the same thing with Shels at times, even though they're second in the league, with players haven't been around and sort of been over relying. I think the one thing that this season has probably taught us, and we didn't maybe see it as much because it happened late in the year, is how much they've actually missed the likes of Ellen Malloy.
Yeah,
I think Ellen has been
in that side now, and I think we're going to see more of her. I think she's had 2 cameos from the bench in the last 2 weeks.
I can't see Ellen starting the game probably for another couple of weeks at least. I think it's probably too early in it.
Is she going to survive the move to Wexford FC? Will we see her with an opportunity elsewhere?
I don't think she'll get a move, and I'll be honest, I don't think she gets a move in the off season. And the reason being is the simple fact is I don't think any club is going to take a risk on her abroad for the fact until she plays at least a half a season, another next half a season with the knee, and then sort of show us that she's out completely over. Because the problem is, and you don't want to put any pressure on Ellen. Ellen's a young kid. You don't want to put pressure on for the fact of an ACL is a big injury. Like, I've been lucky to spend a bit of time with Ellen at 1 or 2 media events and actually sort of chat to her about through the process. And you can see it's taken a lot out of her, but she's been committed to her rehab. She's been committed to getting back as quick as possible. But like, it's still taking the guts of a year for her to actually get back. So
of asking if BReifne Earley's going to go to the Aviva in 2 or 3 weeks' time, could we see Ellen Malloy in that squad?
No. If Eileen Gleeson puts Ellen Malloy in that squad, it's doing Ellen Malloy no justice. Could we see Ellen Malloy back in the Ireland squad for the Albania double header? Maybe. Could that be a little bit too soon? It could potentially be, where it could be Hungary and Northern Ireland the end of November, start of December. That probably could be the more realistic one.
Okay. Let's take a quick look back. We've kind of done the League of Ireland now. I want to chat about a few things. First of all, Katie McCabe nominated for the highest honour, individual honour in the game, the Ballon d'Or. Realistically, probably not much chance of winning it, but how good is it to have an Irish player just on the nominee list?
Roy Keane's the last one in 2000. You know, it's that long since it's happened, and like I think the problem is a lot of Irish fans are probably still going to snipe about, and we've started chatting about this briefly off air. They're still going to snipe about, Katie got rid of Vera. Thankfully, since we were on air last, Vera has come out and done an interview with RTE where she sort of said it wasn't the players, and she started taking that away from Kate.
Like, she started the whole thing. I'm still not over it. I think Vera started it, and then to come out when the whole thing is blown up to go, oh no, don't blame Katie. I only blamed her because I didn't want you to talk about me for a minute.
I said to you all along. Like, I said to you when I walked out of that press conference in Brisbane, I said straight away the first thing I said is Vera could have nabbed that in the bud quickly and got it being a non-story. But for me, Katie deserves an awful lot of credit, and it's funny. I seen the League of Ireland socials tweet a picture of Katie winning Young Player of the Year. I think all the years back when she was a young innocent, and like, you just look at where Katie's come from to what she's done. Her career could have been so different. Her Arsenal career got off to a poor start. She got sent out on loan to Glasgow. That was where she sort of had a choice. She either goes to Glasgow, has an unbelievable time and shows Arsenal what she's worth, or she goes to Glasgow, has an okay time in Glasgow. Glasgow might sign her to keep her on, and she gets released from Arsenal. Whereas when she come back from that loan spell, since then, she's just kicked on. She's just got better. She's got better and better and better, and she's improved massively. Like, she's probably one of the first names on the Arsenal team. She week in, week out, and like, you look at some of the players that they have there. Management trust her, put her in the captaincy for Champions League semi-finals last year when Leah Williams and Kim Little are injured. Like, for me, her performances in the WSL stand out for the reason why she deserves to be nominated. Yes, the World Cup probably wasn't great for any Ireland player. The goal against Canada was obviously brilliant and got nominated for goal of the tournament. But the one question I would ask, and this is just me holding my hands up, did she mean it? That's the only question. But like, for me, to see Katie nominated, and because you know Katie since she's young, I know Katie since she's been in the league since a young age, and just to see where she's gone to, where she's come from. And to me, I'm absolutely thrilled for her. I'm delighted for her to see her doing what she's doing. She truly deserves it. Like, there was a lot of talk last January about Katie Wood, Chelsea putting in a world record bid for her and things like that. Like, that just shows how valued she is. And like, I'm delighted for her. Realistically, if she can maybe finish in the top 10 of the vote, I'd call that a massive success. I did see somebody having a pop at, I won't name the news outlet, who do a top 100 players every year, and Katie wasn't in it this year. I did see someone having a snipe at them to say she's nominated for the Ballon d'Or and she doesn't make that. It was an English journalist had the pop, but like, for us, it's great. The last time Ireland had someone nominated for an award at the Ballon d'Or Awards was obviously going under the name of Stephanie Roach back then years ago for the Puskas Award for the goal she scored against Wexford Youths. And it's all just positive exposure towards the League of Ireland. It's all just positive exposure towards the women's national team. It's all just positive exposure towards Katie McCabe. And to me, couldn't be more delighted for her, and I wish her the best with it. And you know, she's going to lead her country out in the Aviva in a couple of weeks, and it's a massive achievement.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I did have the pleasure of working with Katie as a youngster with under 16. She was on the side that we both were involved in the FAI. Under 16 cup final, beaten by a very solid Colga side, but a lot of League of Ireland women's players were involved in that team, and players who've gone on to represent Ireland in different sports and stuff like that as well. So you knew back then she was a talent, and it's great to.
I remember my first year. What was my first year involved in it? Yeah, it was my first year involved in the league when BReifne beat Peamount United 3-2 in the League Cup final, and the game was dead and buried coming into it. Was nearly. I remember. I'll never forget it because I was going to literally pack up the bag, ready to. The report was written. BReifne scored deep in injury time to send the game to extra time. I just remember that game and remember seeing a young Katie McCabe. And even the week before they played them in the league, they drew 4-4 out in Peamount, and just seeing Katie against these experienced older players, and you just knew she was destined. Like, I think one of our last moments in terms of a Shelbourne jersey is probably the free kick in the Aviva in the cup final, and like, we've been lucky to see where she's gone to. You've had the privilege of working with her. I've interviewed her so many times, and like, she's just a natural born star, and I think she's definitely worked hard to get to where she has got to, and like, it's brilliant. It's, you know, what more can you say about it?
Absolutely. Moving on to another person who's setting the world alight on the field for representing the Irish players, I suppose, in an international competition is the NWSL Challenge Cup. It's kind of the secondary league cup. Most of it played while the players were away at the World Cup in the US. North Carolina Courage qualified by virtue of a 1-0 win over Kansas City Current on, I think it was Wednesday evening, or maybe Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning our time. Denise Sullivan played all the full 90 minutes, but it was a 95th minute, 96th minute winner that put them through to Saturday's final. They'll host that game against the OL Reign. Racing Louisville, actually, I think it is, who are in that final.
Louisville 1-0.
Yeah, so I watched that game the other night. All those games, by the way, I know, Aaron, you weren't aware of this a couple of weeks ago.
No.
So all those games are available for free on the NWSL. Now, they all tend to be like 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. kickoffs, so you'd really want to watch them. But they're good. If you're up late on a Friday night, Saturday night, can't sleep, definitely put them on. Some of them will put you to sleep because the standard of football in some of those teams is not great.
But you just have to realise, BReifne, Saturday, Ireland played a rugby in the World Cup, and Saturday afternoon, game would be over. Denise Sullivan plays at 5:30 as well, and then you can go straight into the League of Ireland game on TV straight after. But I've got a bit of a trivia question for you. There's a famous NFL player involved in, and his wife involved in Kansas City. Kansas. Do you know who it is? No. They're part of the ownership group of Kansas City.
No, I don't.
Patrick Mahomes. Was
the obvious one, but it was almost
his wife, Brittany Matthews, actually played professional football in Iceland.
I did know that, actually. That I did know.
I only found that out last week.
I got the first pick in my NFL fantasy football draft at the week, and then I didn't pick Mahomes. He was one of two, and I didn't pick him. I'm probably going to regret that.
No comment.
I know. Feeling hurt for me, but anyway, it is what it is. So that game is also Saturday evening as well. Plenty of other Irish in action around the Champions League during the week. Katie McCabe, as you mentioned, she featured as part of it. Actually, I'll bring it up here on screen. She featured as part of the Arsenal side there in the league path for the non-champions in the competition. But we had plenty of players. Most of them will be with Shels badges. The Shels girls are in this list as well. But if I sort it by minutes played, Caitlin Hayes, not an Irish international, but eligible for Irish consideration, so she makes the cut. Katie McCabe, they both played full 90-minute games for their respective sides, Celtic and Arsenal. Emily Whelan came on as a 73rd minute sub for Glasgow City against her former side Shels, while Aoife Colville, the Australian-born Irish international, came on for the last couple of minutes of
that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, this is a new feature we've got on the website.
Colville.
Yeah, she came on. It's her first appearance of the season. She hasn't played in their first 5 games.
Yeah, you know why she hasn't played?
I don't.
She's been out with an ACL injury.
Oh, it's good to have her
she's been out for the last year and a bit. So it's good to see her sort of making a return. I know she had one appearance for Ireland, played the first half of a friendly against Iceland, and then sort of she was the unlucky one to be whipped off that day when you could have taken off absolutely anybody from that team. Interesting question, and I need to probably follow up with her. Niamh Farrelly wears number 71 for London City Lionesses. It's a quirky number to pick.
There's some strange numbers. I've been putting information into the site for the Women's Champions League. The number of players in 70s, 80s, and 90s, particularly 97, 98, and 99 for some reason, is absolutely weird. I think it's if 7 or 8 or 9 aren't available, you just double it. It seems to be the attitude. 71 is a little bit strange. Maybe it's 17 backwards if she could.
I think that's what it might be. I must find out and actually find out what it is. But she made her London City Lioness debut as well at the weekend, coming on as a sub at half time, and like there's so many Irish players abroad now. It's mad to.
Well, if you look at the people who've played this week, I'll bring it back up here again. This is just the list of people who have played for a team outside the country this week. It does include the Shels players because of the Champions League, but O'Sullivan with 2 games in the last week in the NWSL. Caitlin Hughes the same, 1 game in the Scottish Women's Premier League last weekend, but a whole host of players who made appearances in the Championship. Louise Quinn with a goal on her first start for Birmingham this season.
Late consolation goal for her.
Yeah, but you can go down here, see just the volume of players. Some interesting names. Hayley Nolan, she featured for Crystal Palace. You mentioned the 2 goalkeepers in action against each other in that game for Lewes and Durham the other day. They're both on the list, Nisha McAloon and Sophie Whitehouse.
Come here, I think
with a goal on her debut for
a second appearance for San Diego. She made her debut. Come on, that was a nice hack. It was a lovely header from Ciara Cruz. So I did see the goal.
Her first start last weekend, though, so she's really hit the ground running with them.
Hayley Nolan for me is an interesting one. Okay, so Hayley was originally a midfielder. London City Lionesses converted her back into a centre back. She was a midfielder in the Ireland squad. Then she managed to perform well to go back in as a centre back. I don't think she actually gets the credit she deserves. She played every minute last year for London City Lionesses in the Championship, and obviously makes the move to Palace. But I don't think she actually gets the credit that she probably deserves, because I remember her coming back, and I'll be honest about it. She came back a couple of years ago from the States and under this rule that annoys me, where they can play for National League clubs during the summer. I don't like that rule. I've said it multiple times. But she come back and she was on the bench for Peamount, and I was sort of like, when she went, surprised that she come back, because I didn't think she was, how would you say, up to the level. And then when she signed for London City Lionesses, the improvements that she's made have been astronomical. And that's the full-time football, swapping the centre back, so comfortable on the ball. I just think for someone like her, I think she's going to have a bright future. I don't think she'll get an awful lot of Ireland caps. I just think she might fall in between the old crop and then some of the players who are the likes of the Jessie Stapletons, the likes of the Aoife Mannions, where she may not pick up an awful lot of caps. But like, she's somebody who could have a really, really successful career in the Championship and maybe eventually make a step up to the WSL. And like, when you see players like that who are playing so regular, and moving to a new club and playing regular again. It's the ones that you watch out for to see how they get on.
Yeah. To finish up the chat on the Women's Champions League, of course, unused sub Deborah Andela Harp, she's joined HB Hogan Denmark. They've had a reasonable start to the season. She's had a one appearance for them so far, unused sub at the weekend. And of course, Diane Caldwell, she comes on for what will be her first appearance in 12 seasons in the Women's Champions League. She's been around for so long, you kind of assume she's playing at that level week in, week out, season in, season out. But she's only, I think, played 2 or 3 games back in a former life in 2011, 2012 back then. So she will make her, hopefully, all things going well. She's been ever present for them in the league so far in Switzerland with FC Zurich, and she's expected to be part of that squad. They play their, I think it's a playoff final on Saturday. If I find it here quickly, they play, I can't pronounce that name, Birkirkara. They're in action at the weekend. So that's 5 p.m. on Saturday evening. A lot of these games available to be streamed as well. Katie McCabe, she'll be involved with Arsenal. They take on Paris FC, not to be confused with Paris Saint-Germain. They're 2 very distinct clubs in the women's game. That's 2 o'clock on Saturday as well. Again, these games, if you look around, you will find...
I think the Arsenal game will probably be streamed on the Arsenal website. I know the first game was. Played a Swedish team in the first game, played a French team in the second game. It's mad the way the Champions League is sort of growing, and like years gone by, we'd have said the Swedish teams. Like you look at when Arsenal won their only Champions League, it was against a Swedish team when Alex Scott played back in the day when it was a 2-legged final.
Yeah. It's been a long time since it's been a 2-legged final. But anyway, in terms of the rest of the week, that's pretty much it for us this week. Anything else that we've forgotten to talk about, Aaron, that's been on your mind for the last week or so?
No. Looking forward to the next couple of weeks. Hopefully people continue to buy their tickets for the Aviva and get out and support a National League club. Actually, yeah, one thing, a reminder that the Galway DLR versus DLR game is free entry in DC Park for anybody who wants to come along. Shamrock Rovers also have an initiative going this week where all school kids and school boys and school girls kids can apply for free tickets. I think that's a good initiative. Hopefully the parents get along and get a little bit hooked and want to bring their family and kids back for a second and third game.
Absolutely. Well, listen, that's it for me, BReifne Earley and Aaron Clarke. Thanks for joining me again, as always, this week for our Irish Women's Football podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. You can check out our website for all the results, stats, and everything of all the Irish players playing abroad and the Women's Champions League this week. We'll be back again next week with another show to everyone at the weekend. Hope you get out and enjoy a game, and we'll be back to you next week. Talk to you then.